going. Good morning, everybody. We're recording this particular session, and it is a quick update on the implementation of the Preferential Procurement Regulations 2022. Let me share some slides here just to get the discussion going. This is a discussion. I've not brought anyone in to tell us what the status is. This is going to be up to all of those who are online today to just share with us. And so I've put together a couple of points just to help frame the discussion. I have invited a couple of people that I know also to just contribute as we go through. Let me just quickly check if there is, no, not yet, if there is anyone yet that's on. But firstly, let's just do a quick update. And I'm looking at the number of participants. I think that's going to grow. So we'll do a little survey on what the status is. And then we will, yes, let's see how that survey goes. But I'll do a little online poll in a short while just to try and gauge, get a sense of what the status is in terms of implementing that. But I thought just to briefly share, and if any colleagues online who would like to share their experiences in getting this done, I want you to please come in and share. Now, let me quickly just run through a couple of points from my perspective on what I've seen. Firstly, there are a lot of expectations. There are a lot of stakeholders in this process. There are a lot of expectations, and from what I've seen, the expectations are quite high as far as this PPR 2022 is concerned. But they are also very different in terms of the expectations and what different people are expecting from this particular regulation. Very quickly, the discussions get legal. And so those that I've seen and I've worked with that have got legal involved early in the process seem to be the ones that work through the issues a lot easier. There is a lot of legality in this. There are a lot of legal issues in this. We are dealing with two acts: the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, the Triple PFA, Section 2.1, says the organ of state must determine its preferential procurement policy. In the Triple BBEE Act, Section 10.1b says that the organ of state must apply any relevant code of good practice in the implementation of its preferential procurement policy. Sometimes you might take the view that those conflict. If they conflict, there's a trumping clause in the Triple BBEE Act to say the Triple BBEE Act then trumps the Triple PFA Act. Now, that's a legal discussion. You could take the view that you can harmonize the two acts. How you do that then starts to get complex as well. So very important to get some legal support in early. Then the last one just to share with you is at least two entities I'm aware of have actually said that the definition of Black people as per the Triple BBEE Act is not to be used for specific goals. And they are using subcategories of race in their scorecard. The one entity that I'm aware of went through a lot of consultation early on in the process. And although they had developed a draft that included Black people in its definition of the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act, there was a different view from a number of members of the accounting authority. And just this week, another board has said that they have to change their policy to now include subcategories of race. Black African, colored, Indian, they would like to treat differently and have a different scoring mechanism. So I just share that with you to say that this is not an easy process, and you really want to plan how you go about putting the scorecards together, who it is that you consult with, that you invite into the process, and then very quickly to get some support from legal and of course from any strong leaders that you've got in your organization to help you with that. Let me just quickly check. Welcome, and I'm just going to quickly be sure that you can unmute and share. Now, you shared last night on the Telegram group that we're running, that, sorry, let me just go back to the slide. You shared last night in the Telegram group that you're running, that you have got the head of your department, Provincial Treasury in Northwest, to sign off the policy. I don't know if you're able to unmute and maybe just share with us one or 2 points that you had, Hal, on that you feel was part of the success of you getting to that point that you got it approved. Are you able to unmute? There you are. Good morning.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, colleagues.
You can bring your camera down a little bit more. There we are.
Yeah, it's load shedding here.
Load shedding.
Yeah.
Any pointers on what do you think, particularly from a stakeholder perspective, was part of the success?
Okay, thank you, Sean. Firstly, Sean, the people that we engaged with is our team, the SCM team that we're working with. It's critical that you first get their buy-in because they are the ones who will be working on the document. We also engaged our provincial internal audit, our internal audit section. We also engaged our provincial supply chain management team, which is in the province. The stage now is the departmental management committee, where it's only senior manager. And that's where now the accounting officer or the HOD chairs that committee. That is the final stage. And this final stage is the meeting that we had on the 30th of January. So it's the stage where now the HOD or the DMC, and the document is distributed prior to the sitting so that they see the document, they make their inputs. Some would even send you, and then we incorporate the inputs when necessary. We agree where we need to deliberate, we deliberate them at the meeting. So this is the process. So we have to go through that process just to make sure that everyone that is relevant is covered. And in that way, you know that you have the buy-in and all the stakeholders have been involved. Even the people who have to implement the programs, they are the ones who actually develop the policy in the end. So that is the process of stakeholder management, Sean.
Well done. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing. And would welcome any comments if there or any questions, I'm sure. Thank you, Carl, for sharing that. Advocate Nsaluba raised her hand. Quick question, Advocate. You can go ahead and ask, Advocate. All right, we're not hearing you. So I'm gonna ask Advocate maybe just check your microphone again. Let's quickly move on to another point just to quickly keep this going. And let me see if I can quickly share here. Advocate, just as soon as you are unmuted, you get the microphone sorted out. Please just say hi, and we'll bring you in straight away. Or you can share the comment or question on the chat. I do have the chat open. Let's quickly run to the next one. This is something that I need to remind myself and those that we're working with often about this, and this came up in a discussion yesterday again and the day before that as well, and that is to understand the preference mechanism that we've got and be sure that you're not diluting the power that we have. Now, the award mechanism we use in the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act is a price and a specific goals mechanism. Price and specific goals. We work out a price formula. We work out a score with that price formula. We add to that score a specific goal score. Now, this is clearly what I'm showing you now is the 2017 regulations and how the 2017 regulations work. But don't. The formula and the mechanism is still the same. Okay. Now, in this example, we've got one company quoted 2 million, one company quoted 2.8 million. If you work out the price score and you get exactly the same score now with PPR 2022, 80/20, if you add the specific goals to company A, and let's assume that's 20, you add the specific goals to company B, let's say it's 0 and it's 20 for company B, the total would be 80, and therefore, as per PPR 2022, company B would be the one that would get the deal. This is showing that the 80/20 system has built into it a premium. It recognizes that we as the state are prepared to pay a premium. Now, the maximum premium in this example is 25%. And that 25% only happens if you've got the difference between the two bidders being 20 points, 0 in the one instance and 20 in the other. You have a 25% premium. Now, that can be significant on large deals. 80/20 goes up to 50 million. In theory, a 50 million can beat a 40 million in the 80/20 system on the basis of the preference points for specific objectives. Now, the point is that as soon as you start to close this gap, the premium closes. The smaller the gap between the two, the smaller the premium. In this example, if company A was to get 2 points for something, yeah, in the 2017 regulations, that they got the 2 points for being a level 8, company A would get the deal in this example. Just showing that you want to be careful about trying to be too fair in this process and using a kind of scorecard approach here, which everybody gets points. Where everybody is getting points, the power of the preference system gets diluted. And you're not going to see the change. And there's going to be a lot of expectations that are not going to be met. Any thoughts on this? I thought to at least just highlight this mechanism. There's nothing else. The only way the preference point system works is it allows a bidder to win the deal despite being more expensive. Where they have the same price, the same BBBEE score, not BBBEE score, the same score for specific goals, they're not going to get the deal. So just watch that one and be very careful on that one. Now, it comes then to another point to get into, which is using the scorecard. And I just quickly want to check if Gerrit is on. There's a consultant who's on that's very, very strongly against using the scorecard. I'm not sure if he is here today. I did invite him, but doesn't look like he's on at the moment. Now, when we look at the 2011 scorecard, National Treasury, and let's just quickly be sure that we're on the same page on this, okay? The BBBEE levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, those levels come from the BBBEE Act. The scoring of points against levels came from the Preferential Procurement Regulations 2011 and 2017. The idea of scoring points for specific goals is not mentioned anywhere else in legislation except in those two regulations, which are now invalid. National Treasury put this idea together for the points against the levels in the 2011 and the 2017 regulations. In the 2017 regulations, National Treasury decided that they would change the scores. 2011, a level 3 scored 16. 2017, a level 3 scores 14. That was a National Treasury decision. Who National Treasury involved in that decision? They've got to tell us at some point in time whether they involved the BBBEE Commission, whether they involved DTIC in that process. What they used and how they used to get to that point is a National Treasury decision. Let me quickly just be sure that both of these are up. Likewise, on the 9010, National Treasury decided to change 3 from an 8 to a 6. So on this platform and in other platforms, I have said that this idea of these points cannot be considered fixed. There's nowhere in legislation that says if you're a level 5, you must score 8 points. There is nothing in legislation that does that. So within the context of what I've just explained around the power of the preference system, I suggested that you could even put in a scoring mechanism that is aggressive and possibly even has a 0 for 3, a 0 for 4. My internet's playing up today. My apologies if it's in a bad way. I'm going to try and get an alternative going here shortly. Any comments? We received some fairly strong comments from someone to say this is unlawful. You cannot stop this. Any comments? As my apologies, I'm really having a tough time here at the moment, so I'm going to just try and use another network shortly. I'm going to quickly, any comments on this point? Perhaps let's quickly ask the question whether you can use a scorecard for this process. And I see some people have raised their hands. I invite you to come in, unmute and talk. I'm just going to quickly turn off my camera here and see if I can try and join with another networking device. Please go ahead, Advocate Nsuluba or Mohwai, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Sean. Sean, I saw the screen that you showed earlier, the one that you asked a question on, the 20 and 18 points to level 1 and 2 only, and 10 and 9 to level 1 and 2, level 1 and 2 of 90-10. I believe that the scorecard is still applicable as the DTIC indicated. However, we still need to remember that it is not the only scoring mechanism or preference point system that should be used. I'm aware that the specific goals for persons or categories of persons, the historically disadvantaged, may be included there. However, there are other goals that can be included because we've got the Reconstruction and Development Program as published in Government Gazette number 16085, dated 23 November 1994. So for me, it would be unfair to only consider the scorecard, the B-BBEE scorecard, because we can still play around with the figures and allocate other points for other goals and not only consider the scorecard. That's my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Any other thoughts? Let's talk about this and let's open up this discussion, because I think there's some help here for anyone who's struggling to get going at the moment. I don't know if anyone is aware of what the Western Cape is doing. Western Cape put out a circular, and if there's anyone in the Western Cape that can please collaborate this. Western Cape put out a circular, Western Cape Provincial Treasury put out a circular and said that they are going to continue using the scorecard as the scoring mechanism post 16 January. And they said for a couple of reasons, and in the particular the circular, they explained why. They said, firstly, the scorecard accounts for the specific things that are mentioned in the PPPFA: race, gender, disability. Race, gender, disability are built into the BBBEE scorecard, number one. Number two, they said that there's a requirement in, and I'm not getting this in exact order, there's a requirement in the Act to say that the basis for allocating points must be, I forget now the exact words, verifiable, monitored, and monitored was the interesting one that caught my eye. That was monitored. Now, National Treasury have said, and they said so in their, hi Abigail, I see your name. National Treasury have said, you're welcome to unmute and interrupt me. It's straight away, Abigail. National Treasury have said the scorecard is not a specific goal. National Treasury said that. And they're right, the scorecard is not a specific goal, but is it not an instrument for measuring specific goals? And that is what I believe Western Cape Provincial Treasury is saying, is yes, BBBEE is not a specific goal, but it measures in a well thought through process a number of specific goals in an organization. It is independently verified by SANAS approved verification agencies. It has got a sworn affidavit process behind it for EMEs and QSEs, and is monitored. Abigail, and then go ahead, Abigail.
Okay. Hi, Sean, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yeah. Yes, I just wanted to mention that also as GMA, we've also taken that position as the Western Cape to use the scorecard because of that very fact that it is measurable. Because if you look at the PPPFA, it says the system that you must use for preference, it must be measurable and monitored. So that's the approach that you have taken. But we've also made room for applying other specific goals. If there could be anything that is in the RDP goals that is not covered in the scorecard. Because yes, we agree that the BBEE scorecard is not specific goals, but it is an instrument. Because if you're looking at the measures that are there that formulate the BBEE certificate, are also part of the RDP goals. And the challenge that we have with the other RDP goals that are not, if we have to use anything else that is not in the BBEE certificate, the proof that a bidder will have to submit for you, for us to give the points, is what we're finding we see is going to be a challenge for us and a risk. But we are working around it and trying to see how we will get around that part. But we have put both instruments, the BBEE scorecard and over and above anything else that is not covered in the RDP goal, but is included in the RDP goals.
Thank you, Abigail. And just maybe share an example of that. Would locality be one of them, for example? An additional goal.
Sorry, Sean, I didn't get you.
So would locality be another specific goal that you could potentially bring in? It's a bit noisy where Abigail is, and thank you, Abigail. I think you've made the point really well there. Thank you. Advocate Nsaluba, I see you've joined with another device. Welcome.
Thank you, Sean.
We can hear you now. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I think let me start with what you've just said and confirmed by Abigail. We need to separate administrative instruments which enable us to have sanity and consistency and measurability in whatever we do. The scorecard is an administrative instrument. It's like your balance scorecard and the chart that comes out of it. It enables everybody to compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges. But that's not where I am. The scorecard is coming from an act. And if you go to that act, actually, Sean, in that small write-up that we did, it's very clear that you shall do that. It don't say you may. So it's not something that you choose to do. It's something that the legislation that has not been revoked says. And it is important that we protect the sanctity of pieces of legislation. So I'm then saying, having said all that, the scorecard is an administrative instrument. And that instrument, for as long as it fulfills what the measurability, the smartness of your indicators, because they must be specific, they must be measurable, they must be achievable, they must be time bound. And worse still, it is monitored through a process that is legislated in the BEE Act. There's an entity that is just existing to monitor the implementation of this particular transformative imperative. So my request would be that it's not about what to use. It's about looking at the administrative instrument and beginning to say, what does it cover in terms of the goals? It has a lot of those goals. And begin to ask if then the question you were raising, how do we include others that are not there? But using it gives sanctity to all the processes. And it is important that we don't throw the child outside with the bathwater, like we said during outcomes-based education. What works must be used. But Sean, the reason I wanted to talk earlier, which I would want you to go back to, the colleague from Northwest, as she was spelling out the processes, I wanted her, for reasons of further engagements that we are going to have, for her to indicate the role of two entities, the internal audit function in terms of their policy and its approval, and the role of the internal audit vis-a-vis the role of the strategic planning unit in terms of ensuring that the goals that have been identified are in the APP, which is supposed to be finalized after the SONA and published as the instrument to implement.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Advocate. Good one.
Okay, then.
We'll ask Kha to come in if to respond to that one. I'm not sure if you heard that question, Kha. Thank you. That's a great point. Thank you. Let me launch the poll. Now, everyone, this is completely anonymous. I have absolutely no interest in understanding who is where and what, and we're not going to be reporting this to anybody. So let's just try and understand the preferential procurement regulations. 2022 were effective 16th of January. We're on the 1st of February now. What is the status? Where are you at the moment? The first option there is you're continuing under the old 2017. Number 2 is you've got an approved preferential procurement policy in place and you're working. Number 3 is you put tenders and quotations on hold until you get the update. And number 4 is we've updated, but we haven't yet got approval. Some of you might have requested exemption. There was a discussion on exemption some time ago, but it didn't look like in the poll that we conducted 2 weeks ago whether anyone had actually applied for exemption. And then the last one is you're still not quite sure what to do and you await direction from National Treasury or Provincial Treasury. Let's just get a sense of where things stand. And I'm going to let that particular process run a little bit. I'm not going to drag today's discussion on too long. Let's keep going and talk a little bit more about implementation. This is all about implementation. Any thoughts that you have on sharing experiences with SPD 6.1? I'm sure your colleagues would welcome your thoughts on how 6.1 is going and what you're doing with 6.1 and whether it is working. So to be clear, National Treasury put onto their website SPD 6.1, MBD 6.1 in the first week of January 2023. They put it out there. It's there, it's available. You can go and get it and you can use it. It was not accompanied by a circular. It was not accompanied by an implementation guide because National Treasury does not have that power to issue anything under a circular or implementation guide. That power does not exist under 2022 regulations. They cannot put a circular out because they're not empowered to do so. In the 2011, in the 2001, in the 2011, in the 2017 regulations, the last regulation, one of the last regulations said that National Treasury can issue circulars and implementation guides to clarify any points or to assist in the implementation office. That regulation does not exist in 2022. So, don't say we're not going to do anything until we're told by Treasury that we've got to change the MBD 6.1. It's not going to happen. They're not going to tell you. It's there. It's available to you. 2.1 says the organ of state must implement a preferential procurement policy and base it on the following framework. And the framework is described in the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. The organ of state, not National Treasury, the organ of state must determine. All right, we're getting a good. Any comments that anyone wants to share on the use of 6.1 and how 6.1 is going? Taruletu, welcome, Taruletu, welcome. You're welcome to unmute and just share with us how it's going.
Thank you very much, and morning to the colleagues. I think on my side, with regards to 6.1, we have used a specific goal called empowerment, where we are looking into, of course, where feasible, at subcontracting from the Oku District Municipality. Now, we've realized on the new 6.1 issued to us, it excludes that portion of, where they declare the subcontracting, the percentage, and who will they be subcontracting. So I wanted to check, can we still include that portion in the new 6.1, or can we still use the old 6.1? Thank you.
Thank you. Good one. And that's exactly why we're raising this particular point. I'm going to share with you something else that's missing there. Any thoughts? Anybody that you want to help and give any perspectives to Taruletu? Any thoughts, any perspectives that you would like to share and give him any thoughts on what you're doing around 6.1? Taruletu, here's Sean's view. This is not National Treasury speaking. All right, I cannot speak for National Treasury. I think Abigail is going to give some ideas. Abigail, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm sorry for the background noise where I am, but I just wanted to find out or to come up with a contrary view. Do we have to use this SBD1 form?
Abigail, there's nothing that says that you have to. The organ of state must determine its preferential procurement and implement it within the following framework. Implement it. You must implement it. That's my view, right? Now there are, and you've got to become comfortable with this point, which is, I think, the question that Taruletu is asking. Can you modify 6.1? Do you even need to use it? Is the question. Abigail saying, do you even need to use it? Well, my view is no. There is nothing that, there's no legislation that says that you must. And there's no power that National Treasury has been given to tell you to. So we're suggesting to many of the people that we're working with to change 6.1. Put in the things that make sense for you. One of the things, for example, that we have found difficulty with 6.1 is this is not easy for a bidder to complete without understanding a whole bunch of stuff. Right? Number one is there is an absolute opportunity here for confusion. 90-10, 80-20, because of this issue of the potential 50 million, that it might be 80-20, it might be 90-10, just having it in this manner, Abigail, can create confusion. Number one, how do they actually work out the points and put those points in is another one. Now, you've raised the point we wanted to raise. Thank you very much for that, Taruletu. is it is silent on a whole bunch of stuff. The one thing it's silent on is how do you work the points out if you're subcontracting? What if you're a company? Let's assume you're a black-owned company, but it's all male. And you have decided that you're going to subcontract 30% of the work to Black women-owned organizations. Do you get the benefit of that? Should you get the benefit of that? And if yes, then how do you score? 6.1 is silent on that. And so the only way, Taroletu, that you're going to overcome that is if you use 6.1, you're going to need to beef it up somehow and update it and put some things in it. It's also not clear on the aspect of proof. It doesn't describe what is proof. It just says that should you as the buyer, the purchaser, I think it says, request proof, then you have the right to do that and ask for the proof. But it doesn't say what format that proof must come in. So one of the changes we're suggesting as well is put it in 6.1, describe in 6.1, what do you mean by proof of locality if you use locality? Let me share with you a quick one on this issue we've got around scorecards. If you're using scorecards, one of the key things with scorecards is that it's governed by an act. In that act, there are codes. Those codes are very deliberate on how you should treat consortiums and joint ventures. It's explicit. At one point in time with 2017, it wasn't clear until this particular update came from in December 2019. I think it was effective December 2019. To say that the BBBEE Act considers joint ventures and consortiums to be consolidated and not consolidated, unincorporated and incorporated joint ventures, and says that if they're going to submit scorecards as a joint venture, be it an unincorporated or an incorporated joint venture, they need to submit a consolidated BBBEE scorecard. And that consolidated BBBEE scorecard will then be used as a basis for the points as what we had in 2017. Now, you need to be clear if you're going to use the scorecard on that particular point is how you're going to treat joint ventures, consortiums, and subcontracting. On subcontracting, let me quickly flash this up, and then we could go ahead. Now here's an example of a unincorporated joint venture. In this particular example, we've got company A and company B that submits one proposal. They haven't created a separate entity. Typically in this kind of arrangement, what the consortium agreement would state is that should we be successful in winning the deal, if we don't establish a incorporated joint venture, Pty Limited, then what we're going to do is one of these companies is going to act as the prime contractor, and they will then subcontract with this other company. Is very often what the consortium agreement might say. So they submit as one, right? We submit as one, but because you can't contract with this thing that doesn't exist, what we will do is if we're successful, then you contract with company A, for example, and company B would then company A would then subcontract to company B, and that's legally how we will take this unincorporated joint venture through to the next stage. The question then is, in an example like this, and this comes down into the same thing as for subcontracting. How do you treat these kinds of examples? Now, in this one, I've said that we've got company A, which is 80% women-owned and 60% youth-owned. And we've got company B, which is 10% women-owned. Okay, this is the example in this one. Now, you have said, for example, in your specific goals that you're going to give 10 points to women-owned enterprises, and you're going to give 10 points to youth-owned enterprises. That's what you said. The question then is, how do you work this out? Going back to that 6.1 is, what do they fill in here? How does a supplier figure out how many points they're going to now claim in this particular example? Here's a view. What we do is we need to understand, and this becomes important then in your 6.1, your amended 6.1. We want to understand, for example, what is the revenue split between these two organizations? In this example, I've said that 40% is going to go to company A, and 40% of the work is going to be done by 60% of the work is going to be done by company B. So because of the goals, what we're going to do then is we're going to work out a score for women, and we're going to take the percentage of the work done by A, apply it to the score for women and youth in this particular example. And here, this particular company gets 3.2 and 2.4. We're going to take the 60% of the work and apply it to the percentage ownership in company B, and therefore the subtotal will be this. Now, this is what some of you might recall is how we did it in 2001 to 2011. Some kind of manner in this way. It wasn't always done as cleanly as I've described here, but this is an example of what you could do. Now, here's the suggestion then. Here's the suggestion. Sorry, I keep forgetting your name. Taruletu. Here's the suggestion. For subcontracting, treat subcontracting and consortiums in the same way. If company B was being subcontracted in this example, and there was a different percentage that is being subcontracted, apply the subcontracting, the same consortium logic that I've given you here, apply that same consortium, that same logic in subcontracting. My view is, and this is up to you, the organ of state must determine its preferential procurement policy and implement it within the framework. You must determine this. How are you going to score? This is one way that you can do it. I don't think it would be right. This is my view, that you've got an organization, a supplier, that has in good faith decided to subcontract work to companies that are 100% owned by disabled people, but they do not get recognition for that. For me, that's not just. So we've got to work this out, and your point around the subcontracting is taken, and I wanted to add to that by actually just sharing this particular view on the consortium perspective. Any comments? Any comments? The chat is open. I'm very interested to see the chat is very quiet today. Welcome to put some points in. By the way, this gets quite complicated when you start to have multiple specific goals. Youth, women, disabled, military veterans, small businesses, locality. Hey, Thandi.
Hi, Sean. Good morning, colleagues.
Good morning.
You know, I'm looking at this thing here. You're bringing back a lot of traumas that we were dealing with in 2011. It was tedious. My question then is, can I decide as an organ of state to say, you know what, I'm not going to split it to that detail? You know, maybe it becomes all or nothing. I know that there might be a backlash to say, why don't you give me some benefit because there's some portion of the ownership. I know, especially for companies owned by people with disability, it's very rare to find a 100% owned company of people who have a disability. But can I decide to say it's all or nothing? It's 20 points for 100% Black owned, that's it. If it's 91, 92, I'm not giving you anything.
Good question. 2.1 says, the organ of state must determine its preferential procurement policy and implement it within the following framework. You must determine it. Well, look, how Go ahead. You're welcome
Okay.
to. There we are. Yes, your thoughts.
Thank you. Morning, Tandy. The issue of fairness, Tandy, I think will come in, and we need to be mindful of obtaining or getting exactly what this is meant for or intended for. I know that this could be complicated because of the calculations and whatever, but there are challenges of fronting. If we say we give everything and if we say we don't give at all, it would be unfair. At least give people what they actually deserve. Come up with a mechanism. There has to be a mechanism of making sure that we give them what they deserve. The issue of fairness, this is where it comes in. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Carl. Yeah, there we are. There's some points, everybody, and it's just to say that wow, it's you know, this is not that easy. And when we start adopting, and when you start adopting a different approach, there's a lot of things to think through, and just hope that this has helped you. Let me quickly end the poll. Poll is still up. I'm going to end the poll shortly and then share it with you. And very interesting to see where we stand. Right, ending the poll now. Let me share the results. I see someone has raised their hand. Right, I'm sharing the results now. Let me see if I can try and put this onto a screen. So quite interesting. There are still a couple of people that are using the old policy 2017. I noticed on the Telegram group that there was a little discussion running with a particular organ of state where they have been told to assume that the 2017 preferential procurement regulations only die on the 16th of February. Be very careful about that assumption. The 12-month period did not start from day zero on the 16th of February 2020. There was already a number of weeks that had passed, and so it wasn't the full 12 months. So just be very careful about that one. But interesting, 7% is still continuing with the old policy. Be aware that there's a high risk of irregular expenditure findings for those that are. But very encouraging, 35% have actually approved, have updated the policy, and you're running. That is encouraging. 16%, this has actually dropped a bit. 16% have put their quotations on hold. I think that we've got my questions are not well framed here, but I think it gives us a sense. And a third of the people online today have updated and are awaiting approval. And I think that's the big thing, awaiting approval. There's another other, a couple of people said other, and you're welcome to unmute and just share what that is. Let me just quickly see if I can put this on just to be sure that you can see this. For some of you might not be able to follow what's on the slides at the moment. Any comments? I think this is getting better from a there it is. I can share this with you now. It does seem to be getting better, but not vastly. Okay, here is the here's the poll. So we're looking at about 35%. Yeah, so fairly quickly then. So we're looking at about 15% of the companies online are still on hold. It's probably higher because of my questions are not well framed here. Probably is a little bit higher. But there are some different ways to circumvent that. But I think that gives us a good feel for where things are. Any other thoughts to share, anybody? on the topic. Let me just quickly check if I've covered all points with you. We're on an hour. Systems issues. I know that there were some that raised some difficulties around systems issues. Senatemba, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, colleagues.
Go ahead, you're welcome. We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let me start by systems issues. What we have done, first of all, for us, the board has approved the new regulations to be incorporated on the policy, on our policy on the 30th. Now we have also we've also issued communication to the organization to ensure that for now we are using SmartGov as our system. So on systems, what we've done, we've issued communication to say, up until the system is configured to also give effect to the new regulations, then we'll just pause until that process is concluded. But ICT is busy with that one.
Do you have any thoughts on how long that'll take?
No, we've given them at least by, I think, next week or so, they will be done, because we had been engaging whilst we're still approaching the board, but we have also been engaging with them in terms of the anticipation, should we be granted that approval, which we have been granted. So there's been communication between the two units in anticipation of that, because I know that we're approaching the end of the financial year, so we need to expedite everything. So that one, at least we are still fine with that one. But also for me, the only confusion that we're still also struggling with is the issues of how these are affecting the joint ventures and also consortium, or maybe also, and also the calculation where, if maybe we had indicated that for a company to be more than 51% women owned, then what happens when the company is less than that? Then I think there are still areas that we feel that we are not clear and they need proper guidance, because we sometimes, when we do the professional services like engineering and all of that, you would get those consortium or you get those joint ventures, but we also need to be properly guided on that one. And I'm sorry that I've joined late, but if maybe it has been addressed, I will listen to the recording. But if not, maybe it's a challenge that I would also be requiring to be assisted on, especially the joint ventures consortium one. And also where, if now the regulation is saying more than 51%, then you give these points. What happens when there is less? Maybe it's one company, but then it's less than that. Then what do you do? Thank you very much, Sean.
Very good. Senator, I did give a suggestion, and you might have just joined later, and it was just before 11 that I gave a suggestion on how to do that. So you'll pick that up on the recording, and I'm going to just share that link with you shortly.
Okay, thank you, Sean.
But just be sure, right? Let me just quickly put my video on here. You're not going to get guidance from anyone. You must determine. You must determine how you're going to do this. You must determine the 50%. You must determine whether there's a lower case. Treasury is not going to help you out with this one, Senator. And I think that
okay,
yeah, that's the key point but well done to you that you're getting to that you're asking those questions, because they are very, very important questions. It brings a lot of complexity in working the scores out. And it is a very big factor in construction, engineering projects, as you say. Let me just quickly put this one up. This is my suggestion on an approach for doing it in this particular example. And one of the things that I suggest as well, I think Henry actually made this point somewhere, is remember in the 2017 regulations, we had that very complicated subcontracting clause that said, should you subcontract more than 25% to an entity and that entity is worse level than you, then you don't score the points. However, you do score the points if it's an EME. Remember that one,
yes.
September?
Yes, I remember.
I mean, we want to get away from that, right? That was a very complicated
Yes.
thing. And so
it was also complicated even then.
Yeah, so we're suggesting this kind of approach here for consortiums and subcontracting, use it for the same. Don't bring in some other kind of rule, use the same logic.
Yes.
The percentage subcontracted, you take the percentage, you apply to the ownership. And then I think that Tandi's point is also relevant, is if you've got an organization and they've got 35% ownership by people who are disabled, we've got to be very careful about that 50% thing, right? There are not going to be a lot of companies that are more than 50% owned by people who are disabled, or 100% owned by people that are disabled. And so be careful to bring that in. So I would caution on the that issue of only giving points if you're more than 50% owned by people who are disabled. I'm not sure it's gonna necessarily help progress the transformation that we're looking for. There we are. Thanks, Senator.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean.
Does this help? Does this make sense, what I've shown here? Is this?
Yes, it does. It does. I'm following it. And also I'm gonna download it for the recording as well as this, so that we can also have our internal discussion based on this, because we had a brief session even yesterday where there are other areas that we've highlighted as gray, but we're still also continuously engaging on this, because we also want to be able to say, does this practically actually work? Because we want to say, if we look at infrastructure projects, then these changes must also give effect to the success of the project itself, and not as opposed to maybe bringing some gray areas where there is a lot of subjectivity. We do not want that. That's basically why now we've been given authority to customize this to what works with us as a regulator.
Are you comfortable that you're going to change 6.1?
Sorry?
Are you comfortable to change 6.1?
We've discussed that, and we are comfortable with that because we understand the objective.
Good one.
But then also, as we had indicated earlier on, it also puts more responsibility on us to explain this in detail to service providers, because sometimes it's difficult when they are completing this. You can see that there is a challenge there. Then it put more responsibility on us to ensure that we educate, because these changes are not only for the completion, just for ticking all the boxes, but they need us to basically make them understand what is the objective of government in addressing these issues. And then when you are completing it in such a manner, then basically what is that giving effect to? So we do have that responsibility, and we understand why it must be also have these changes. But at the end of the day, I think by come March, I think everybody now would have attempted and more engaged on this, such that we would have at least policies that also speaks to what we have done. And with these engagements like this one, it's also going to poke to all these great areas and address maybe them, so that it's going to be easier even for our executives to make decisions on this. But then they are not going to be making this decision if we do not properly interrogate and also engage on this. Thank you, Sean.
Senator, do you think we've underestimated the change impact of this?
Sorry?
Do you think we underestimated the impact of the change? Just as you're talking now, I mean, there's system changes. We've got to train our people on how to do this. The evaluation committees need to. I was with the bid specification committee yesterday. Bid specification committees, they're going to have to figure this out. If you're using specific goals, as in Black owned, women owned, owned by people who are disabled, locality, that's work that BSC's never had to do before. Now they're going to have
Yes,
to say, they don't have to, and they're going to have to be very clear. If they say locality, that not only are they very clear on that locality, but that it is clear on how they're going to measure it.
yes.
Because when we start
and also
stepping
what
out
would
of,
constitute evidence.
yeah,
And also what would also constitute the evidence of such locality?
exactly.
Do you then require a letter from the municipality or address, whatever? So, but in agreeing with you, Sean, it's gonna, we might have underestimated the changes, but also even the extent of work that is required, because especially this time where most of the organization have a March financial year end, and also even already the audit has started. So you would basically need to train the SpecCom, the BEC, the BAC on all of these. And in order for one to be able to do that, we also at supply chain need to also master this one so that we can, because we are running a risk of making specifications and also not properly advising the BSCs, such that at some point we might be returning or canceling the bids, because now the issues of being responsiveness might be a challenge. But it's a work in progress. It's something that is basically doable, but also it also needs everyone involved, even to appraise those who have the authority to make this decision, to be familiar with the challenge that we are faced with, and how best can we make use of this time from now until end of March, so that come next financial year, we can be able to start at a clean slate. But also it's going to be a challenge, as I indicated earlier on, with the year end as well as the audit, but it's going to be doable. We have to do it. Thank you, Sean.
Good one. May I suggest a big addition to the communications and training program that we have to have is we've got to start communicating to suppliers. We've got to start managing suppliers, and particularly if you're changing and you're using specific goals, is what National Treasury are hoping you're doing, that that suppliers understand, and that we're helping them with the process. Less of an issue if you're using the scorecard as a basis for your specific goal scoring points. And then last one to mention is, don't forget to also communicate and train and make your boards aware of what's going on. I was pulled into a board meeting last week, and you know, there was a board member there that said, but surely, Sean, you just follow what's in the 2022 regulations. I mean, what's difficult about that? You know, we've had 3 regulations. This is the 4th one. I mean, what's changed is what he said. And I said, well, yeah, there's a lot has changed because there's nothing in the 2022 regulations. You've got to figure it out. So important to also bring the boards on board if you've got them. It sounds like those that you've done that. So well done. Let's see if there's anything else. I know that Advocate Nsaluba wanted to make a point. And go ahead, Advocate.
Thank you, Sean. And thanks to the inputs that have been given. Just on the slide, Sean, that is in front, a beautiful slide. But are we then saying, I'm just looking at the legality of what we're doing. Yes. You are having company A, and then you call it a consortium agreement.
Yes.
I'm picturing myself having to write that agreement as opposed to a JV.
It's not uncommon.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
But then the question is, when you say revenue split, which revenue are you talking about? Because, and I'm taking you back to the scorecard, how the scorecard is going to look like with regards to this. And I want to remind you of an interesting injunction that was given by one of the colleagues, I think it was from the Western Cape, when we had this type of nice calculation. I just can't remember what he actually said is the best way to deal with it. No. He said we must use the scorecard because we had a similar calculation, and he was more or less saying in an interesting way what Tandy was saying, that you don't want to complicate, but at the same time, you would want to make sure that you use a bit of arithmetic to justify what you are doing. The question then I have for you, Son, is what becomes of the scorecard? That was our discussion last time. What becomes of a scorecard that's going to be used for due diligence in this type of a scenario that is on the slide?
If you were to use the scorecard in that kind of scenario.
Yes.
If you were to use a scorecard in that kind of scenario, then you need to do as the Act says and the code say, you need a consolidated scorecard. So in this example here, they actually have to go and get a scorecard as if they were one. And that is what the codes say. So they actually have to go to a standards verification agent and say, hey, you know, we're a level 1, 100% black owned. We're a level 2, 60% black owned. This is how much work is going to be done by A. This is how much work is going to be done by B on this particular project. And therefore, you know, give us a scorecard as if we were one. And that's what the Act says. So when you're using the scorecard as a basis for scoring your objective, your specific goals, then you need to then request a consolidated scorecard as if it was one.
Would you have done the same thing if you were doing the subcontracting under the old arrangement?
Under the old arrangement, no. Under the old arrangement, they had that complicated rule that just said you are the one that gets the points. However, if you're subcontracting more than 25% to somebody, there's a risk of fronting. So you might be a level 1, but you're subcontracting to a level 8. You could be fronting for that level 8. We will not give you any points for that particular scenario. So that's what was used previously in the subcontracting manner. And I think that was also the point that was made by Thandi, is that risk of fronting is still there in this kind of, in that subcontracting scenario. Yeah, lots to think about.
The last question would be for me, you were talking about the actual service providers that are going to be
completing the forms. Yeah.
Yes. Now what I want to know, if you put yourself in their shoes, which one is maximizing the value of a service provider? Because I suppose at this point, organs of state should be looking at the maximization of value of what we want to do as part of transformation.
Yeah.
Yes, service delivery is part of it, but you want, for example, if you are in the mining sector, you have clear instructions there that the codes that you must deal with. The same within the construction industry. Now, I thought this would be a process of us being able to merge best practices, and as organs of state beginning to say what has worked best in sectors, and we merge it, like you had said with SPG 6, that we don't, it's an administrative instrument. So the same thing we said with the scorecard. Administrative instrument remains an administrative instrument. So you should have the liberty legislatively and authoritatively to add whatever you have put in your policy. Let's go back. What you've put in your policy as an organ of state must we then find this translation in the administrative instruments for as long as you can justify the inclusion of it, because it's you who's going to use it. But I'm looking at synergizing the two now, such that then the service provider is not unnecessarily burdened. And to complicate it further, Sean, to make sure that service provider X, when he bids for the same thing, is not frustrated about who is going to do the adjudication, because this is across various organs of state. Like you are buying, let's say you are doing this for what should I say? I don't want to say toilet paper. I want to take something that is common across. So whatever is happening, if that is a utility that is there, take computers, for example, notebooks, we should be cognizant of the fact that whatever we do, it must allow service providers not to waste time on arithmetic, but to be able to waste time on delivering what you are looking for. That's just my plea, insofar as administrative instruments. Hence, the earlier version, yes, it was the food cooked, but cooked by the wrong person, but it enabled uniformity. And I'm pleading that whatever we do, the administrative instruments, which is what I like about what you are doing, you are assisting us to get the uniformity. And it is important so that we don't overburden the service providers. We want service delivery, not administrative burden.
Thanks, Advocate. Good one. I'm gonna end the discussion now. For today, we are 22 minutes past 11. Thank you, everybody. I hope that was of help. Thank you to everybody who contributed. Don't sign off yet. Next week, we are going to have a very special person talk to us about strategic planning. And it's very timely. There will probably be a Sono next week. And strategic planning is very important. It is also a time for all of you to start pulling your procurement plans together. And so very timely discussion next week, just some of the basics and some of the important considerations around strategic planning. So be sure to join us next week for that. Let me quickly put onto the chat. I'm just going to put onto the chat the YouTube channel. Apologies, we didn't get the one from last week on yet. What I might do is so we'll do that that soon. And then here is the YouTube channel in the chat. There's the link. Ron, good morning.
Good morning, Sean. Sorry, I tried to send a message, but it said the chat was disabled.
Oh, my apologies. Let me quickly see. Go
Sean,
ahead.
Having a session focused on strategy is much welcome. But my advice to get the maximum numbers to sell it. I'm lacking specifics. Are we discussing, what makes SCM strategic? Are we discussing strategic sourcing? Procurement plans, which is a compliance mechanism, to me is at an operational level. It's got nothing to do with strategy. Unless I'm missing something, we only do it because of the compliance. So maybe just give us more details to determine whether we should prioritize what seems to be an important
how we should prioritize next week's session. Thanks, Ron. What I discussed is that we're a supply chain practitioners here. We're not necessarily strategic planners. The focus is not on strategic sourcing. The focus is on strategic planning from an enterprise, a government enterprise perspective. What are all the different things that are happening in the space that influence the strategic plans of an organization? And as supply chain practitioners, how can we read those? What can we expect from them to help us formulate our strategic plans within SCM? And you're right, Ron. we don't necessarily have a strategic view on procurement planning at all. One of the benefits might be that we start to understand the opportunities to bring procurement planning more in as a strategic tool in the SCM planning process. So it's more around strategic planning, understanding all the things that are happening within government around the systems that we have, the business that we have. I hope that helps. We'll try and put some more information out.
Sean, I've got slightly more clarity. but maybe I'm confusing the clarification process with wishing to engage with this. I think when you started off, you spoke about practitioners, which almost implies we're at a clerical or maximum managerial level. But I don't think a head of SCM, and we have a number of heads present and a number of key people involved in law, etc., wouldn't regard themselves as just practitioners.
Thank you, Ron. I should have said professionals, yeah.
Well, not necessarily even professionals. We're speaking here about levels, because the strategic level. And then the second presumption was that we just dovetail as SCM into the overall strategic plan. But my understanding of a good SCM strategic plan is that we as influencers, as strategists, influence the strategy of the organization. And so there's an interdependency and an intercommunication between where we'd like SCM to be and where we'd like the organization to be, and we come up with mechanisms to take the organization to the next level. For example, sustainability and innovation and systems and 4IR and all the rest of it. So Sean, based on the spec you've given us, I'm still not excited about attending. Maybe you can tell us who the speaker is and and the experience they've had in changing the strategy of organizations from an SCM point of view.
The speaker that I've invited is Advocate in Saluba. And particularly through some of the engagements I've had with her outside of this platform on strategic planning issues and what she's been doing, and particularly in the military, how she's been applying that at a strategic point. So
okay, so Sean, that gives me great confidence because she's highly respected, and I think she's on this platform. So please, anything I've just said beforehand is no reflection on that. And I think, but what I'm hearing, Sean, is maybe it's a focus on strategy from a legal perspective. So what are the legal trends? What is the legal SWOT analysis? What are the legal impacts of, for example, the trajectory of the draft procurement bill on our strategies going forward? But I'm just conjecturing.
Sure.
I'm really pleased she's talking, and I look forward to being there. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Ron. And I think she actually shared with me earlier that she is a strategic planner before she's a lawyer. So maybe that helps with that one. Hey, Thandi.
No, I wanted to interject that you guys are chasing it. Can we just go to next week and hear what next week is about? Yeah, thank you. But Sean, can you please look at the chat, Margaret? What Margaret is raising on the chat. Thank you.
How have you guys incorporated local content in your new policy? Has the instruction notes and local content been repealed? Does it have to feature? Apologies there. Marjorie? Yeah, that's a great question, Marjorie. I mean, I don't want to be the one to give you Sean's perspective, but let's see if there's anyone else that's got a view that can potentially help you. Let me give you this view. From you mentioned instruction notes. The local production and local content legislation, those instruction notes were actually circulars, and all of those circulars were issued under PPR 2017. So they were all issued under PPR 2017, and they were not issued under MFMA or PFMA. They were issued as part of the Preferential Procurement Regulations 2017. The Preferential Procurement Regulations and everything that was issued under them were fell away. They died on the 15th of January 2023. Midnight on Sunday, they're finished. So there is no requirement of you to include local content in your policy from a legislative perspective. if you are in an institution where you're buying a lot of product, and the product that you're buying, you can make an impact on the economy by encouraging local production, build it in. I'm going to ask somebody else to come in. Tandy, I'm not sure if you can carry on and give some perspectives to Marjorie.
I think, Sean, you covered it correctly to make reference to the PPP 2017. But I think what needs to be remembered is that it's not necessarily mean that local content should not be considered at all. It's just that state institutions need to understand that the minute they talk local content, they must engage with DTI, and DTI will guide them. Because I've picked up that there's some discomfort where people think that now local content is illegal. But it's very, very important that if you want to go that route, please engage with DTI.
It's optional, really, at this point. So I hope that helps, Marjorie. I don't know if there is anyone that is including local production, local content into their preferential procurement policies. I have not seen it, and I think what we've been suggesting is rather don't put it in at this point in time. It's not clear how it was treated in 2017 was a condition of tender. Some were actually saying it was almost like a pre-qualification criteria, and that because Supreme Court of Appeal said that Regulation 4 was invalid, some are thinking that maybe we shouldn't do that. But yeah, there we are. But thank you very much also to Tereletu. Thank you. You've shared your specific goal breakdown. We'll have a look at it. We'll see if I can try and get that shared a little bit more. How can one verify if a company is an EME or QSE except the affidavit? Relate to how can one verify if a company is an EME or QSE except the affidavit? The preferential procurement regulations, the Broad-Based Black Market Empowerment Act, the Amendment Act, and the codes are very clear that you may not use anything else. So you cannot ask a company to give you, it's a sworn affidavit. And so they are telling you that we are an EME. They fill that form in. They're telling you that if you suspect that they may not be, then you should report them to the Broad-Based Black Empowerment Commission, the BBBEE Commission, and ask the Commission to look into it. That's a view. Someone else might have a comment to make. Any other points? If not, there we are. Thank you. Looking forward to next week. I really am. And Ron, I think your questions were spot on, just to help us frame and get ready for the discussion next week. So all the best, everybody. We'll try and get this onto the YouTube channel. A lot of you have got lots of work to do to be sure that you can implement your policies if they've been approved, or some chasing to do. And for those of you that are waiting, do not hesitate to start training, to start communicating, to start managing expectations, because do not underestimate the change management impact of this change. Very good. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.